This video is going to show you a couple more plots that we can do with quantitative data, that we do on quantitative data a lot of times. So these are just a couple more plots. The first one is a scatter plot. So the scatter plot is actually basically just plotting X and Y values. If we have both of the variables are quantitative, it would be X and Y values. So you can think of it as your dependent variable and your dependent variable, or in our terminology, it would be your response variable tilde your explanatory variable. So always think of it as your response variable comes first, tilde your explanatory variable. If there is no response variable, you're still going to have the tilde explanatory variable. But in a point plot, a scatter plot, which is called a point plot, you will always have both. We're going to use this data frame elevation, and the way you do a scatter plot is just GF point, because it's basically just a bunch of points. And then we're going to use the variables temperature and elevation. If you want to see what this, actually I don't have this one read in yet. So actually I'm going to take this out just so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to again read this in. I'm going to run this chunk, and that reads in my data frame. I come over here into my environment, and I now can see elevation is now there. I can click on it, and here is my X and Y, my elevation and temperature. And now I can create an R chunk. So I'll add in an R chunk, and my R chunk is going to be GF point, because again, point is for a scatter plot. I'm doing temperature as my response variable, tilde elevation as my explanatory variable. Those of us who live in Flagstaff know that if you go down in elevation, you get hotter. If you go up in elevation, you get cooler. So we see this a lot. So elevation would be what is explaining the temperature changing. The data is called elevation, and then I put a title on it, temperature versus elevation. I didn't like my X labels before, so I changed my X labels to be elevation feet, and my Y label would be temperature degrees Fahrenheit. And mostly it's because they won't put the units, and I like units on my graphs. And here it is. What we like about these type of graphs is we can now look for relationships that we might think are here. Looking at this, it looks like it's decreasing because we're going from upper to lower. It also which makes sense, if you go up in elevation, you should be getting cooler. It also looks like it might be more linear, so because I can see it going down. So if I ask you what kind of relationship it is, it's linear and decreasing at the same time. So you want to use both those terms, as opposed to other ones that could be exponential or other types of functions. So you want to kind of think of what your functions are. So this is how you do a point plot. The main thing about plots is you want to then talk about what story they give for you. So this is why I talked about it's decreasing and it's looks linear. So you want to make sure you give the story. Another type of plot we see a lot is what is called a time series plot. So again, I'm going to read in this variable, this data set dates. I'm going to go ahead and read that in. I now see dates shows up in my environment. I can look at dates. This is the day of the year, day of the month, or day of the, might be day of the, looks like day of the month. Time is written this way because it actually is going to take out the day, the month, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and just make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just a dummy variable, basically, just to label these a little bit easier for R to deal with, because R can't deal with these months, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So it just was a dummy variable added in. And then this is how many rooms are rented. And then I can go ahead and create an R chunk. And this R chunk would be a GF line, because it actually, because it is time data, it keeps an order. So because it's time data, we can actually keep it in a nice, neat order. And so I can look at this and I want to know, on day 1 came first, day 2 came second, and so forth. I want to see kind of what's happening. And so this is what's called a time series plot. And it's going to be a line graph. So instead of being a GF point, it's GF line. Rooms is my response variable. Time is my explanatory variable, because I'm looking at what day in the month it is, and then I can look at that information. And so I then go ahead and use my data as dates. I put a title on it. I also, and I'm going to show you what happens if I don't have this command in there. So I'm going to pull that out for just a moment. I'm going to have X label. I like to have it where time is a day since day one, just to give some units to it. My X lab is a number of rooms. It makes more sense than just rooms. And I can run it, and here is my time series. And I can see it's going up and down and up and down. It looks like when we're on a weekend, it looks like we had more times, and then we had some definitely slump times. One of the things I notice is that this axis doesn't start at 0. And we like our vertical axis to start at 0. So I may go ahead and add in a command that will make that happen. And the command that makes that happen is I want my Y limits, we call it a Y lim, for Y limits, and I want it to equal the combination of 0 to, let's say, 100. And I did 100 because this went up to 80. So I could go to 80 and just stop at 80, but I like to see a little bit on my graph. So I went to 100. I'll run this one. Whoops, didn't like something. Didn't it like? Guess it didn't like me going all the way up to 100, so I went up to 90. So to 90 instead. And there is my graph. And actually it only went up to 80 because it realized there's nothing above the 90. So here it is. It didn't start at 0. That's weird. But this command should make it start at 0. So you can see what's going on from here down. We like to do that. I don't know why this isn't working. A lot of times it does work, so I don't know why it's not. All right, so this is something else we can do, is graph these line graphs. And line graphs are nice because it gives you a trend. You can see what's kind of happening over time and so forth.